You are listening to the Queens of Quality podcast. This podcast will discuss some of the basic and not so basic impacts of compliance and quality within the pharmaceutical and biotech industries. We have a balance of laughter and education as we discuss the misconceptions about quality assurance within an organization. We are your hosts, Jen and Michelleanne. Let's get ready to start the show. Welcome back to the Queens of Quality. I am your co-host, Michelleanne Bradley, and I am here with Jen.
Hi, Michelleanne.
Hi, Jen. And we are also joined again today by Emily Barker.
Hello.
And Steve Thompson.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you all again, hear you all again.
And today is our wrap up of the mini season on AI and ethics. So, who wants to start?
Well, I know we were talking about how we wanted this mini season to go. We talked about what the ask is. We want people to reach out to us and get involved with the ARB. And then we talked about what the ARB really is and how it could be used and the importance of it. This episode, I think, is really about the why. Like, why is it so important? And what other things we really need to consider. As someone who I admitted during previous episodes that I am not a subject matter expert when it comes to artificial intelligence by any means. So there's something that we were discussing, and I'd like our experts to really expand on that. And that was the idea of the negative programming. So I know my idea of what negative programming is. It kind of comes back to like being 6 years old and being punished type of thing. I don't think that's what you're talking about. So I'd like you to kind of expand a little bit more as to what that means within the context of AI.
Okay, so when it comes to LLMs, so I don't know if we've talked about that term before, but large language models. So that is the data that is being fed to the AI. What they've found is that when they use negation, so when they use the word no or don't, that it essentially confuses the AI because it's looking for, if given word 1, 2, and 3, what's word 4? And if word 3 is no, then it completely reverses what the possibilities would be for that word 4. And it can be as easy, as straightforward as the sky is not blue. And it doesn't understand that concept because we didn't give it an answer. We didn't give it a concrete way to go. And so it will actually give either wrong answers after that. The sky is red. The sky is black. Or it'll give just generic answers. The sky is, because it doesn't know where to go. And so when it comes to negatives, that is where it gets confused. And then the other piece is that it's looking for pattern matching. So it wants to match the pattern against something it's seen before. And when it's not, and when it's no, it hasn't seen that before. And so it doesn't automatically reverse the not no answer. And it's definitely an issue that we've seen with AI and we've seen with art and poetry. You know, hopefully it will get better and the algorithms will get better so it can deal with it. But right now we're still having issues with the word no.
So if I could, just for fun, while you were talking, Emily, about this, I went to ChatGPT and I simply put in the prompt, "The sky is not blue." So it responded, the statement, "The sky is not blue," is generally incorrect under normal circumstances on Earth. And then it goes on and starts explaining scattering. It goes on to say, however, there can be instances where the sky appears to have different colors And it goes on, and then it wraps up and doesn't give an answer, basically says, if there are specific conditions or context you're referring to where the sky is not blue, please provide more details for a more accurate response. So I literally just typed that in and it's trying to guess, but it says, I don't have enough information because you just said the sky is not blue. And Emily, to your point, it makes sense if we do like Boolean logic where I want a house that has a roof, that has a door, that has a window, but it's not blue. What's not blue? The house, the roof, it's confusing. And so that's how we get tripped up. And the output of the prompt that we're asking AI throws a proverbial wrench in the spokes.
I actually think that I get that.
And to add to it, what Jennifer said early on, she talked about a 6-year-old and it just kind of clicked. If you say to a 6-year-old, you're not going to go to the store, you're going to get, but I need to, but I have to, but so AI is going to start trying to act like a 6-year-old child because it's trying to give answers to something that it was given a no. And it just like a 6-year-old or a child, it doesn't handle the no's too well.
I know a lot of 50-year-olds who don't handle the nose too well.
Why you gotta throw me under the bus like that, Jen?
That's a great example, Steve. Not the one about Michelleanne being under the bus. But that's where, again, for me, again, I kind of want to bring it into like simplest terms because I fully acknowledge I am not an expert in this area. So I try and come up with very almost like real world parallels. So I have seen that child throw a temper tantrum in Walmart, when they don't get the toy, like that kind of thing. And that's kind of what I hear you saying, that this whole negative programming piece is about, is that's essentially what happens for it. I know that the algorithm doesn't feel, we can get into that in just a second.
Yeah.
And I'm a visual person. So that's the visual I get, that, okay, like we're chugging along. It's a good day. And then something happens and it goes, or it becomes that colleague who doesn't know the answer and they just continue to talk without saying, actually, I don't know.
Excellent point.
We were talking about a little bit earlier, AI doesn't have self-awareness or empathy.
Exactly right.
So it doesn't know to say, I don't know, because it's programmed or the expectation is that it gives an answer.
Look, that even brings up another point because we human beings are trying to make sense out of artificial intelligence. And earlier we were talking artificial intelligence that is antisocial, artificial intelligence that doesn't have emotion. So we are supposed to be gregarious social beings with intelligence and emotion. And we're trying to make sense of a mathematical algorithm that has no emotion and no social skills whatsoever. So hence, that's the dilemma that we're facing right now. Yet at the same time, bringing like the ARB, the algorithm review board that we're talking about, is to bring the compassion, the common sense, the emotion, the feeling to fill in the gaps of where artificial intelligence, machine learning in general falls short because it doesn't have those critical things. And we're dealing with human lives here, human beings, et cetera. So that's what we're bringing to the table here, the compassion, the common sense, the emotion to make ethical decisions upon what we're doing.
I love it. So Stephen, the piece too, that kind of to bring it all together. And I think we talked about this in an earlier episode where about AI is not replacing people. It is a tool for people. And that's where I liken it to a hammer. That's the kind of thing. Eons ago, things were built, yet they didn't have hammers and nails. And it evolved into now having this hammer. And now we have, I love going to those hardware stores and just kind of looking at all the fun toys they have to make stuff, So this is just the next iteration of all of that. The AI is a tool for us humans who have the common sense, the knowledge, and the wisdom that you talked about from the last episode, Steve, plus the empathy as a human being. You hope that we are empathetic, that all of those things help us make better decisions for the people that we're trying to help in the clinical studies or in a healthcare setting and that type of thing. Is that kind of a fair assessment?
Yeah. And I mean, earlier we were also talking about human in the loop, and you don't just grab, to your analogy, a hammer and throw it at a construction site and walk away and think it's going to build. No, you got to have skilled people that are using it, right, in
Right.
the appropriate way. So anyway, you have to have the right people using the right tools at the right time is the point with all of that there, not misuse of the tools, or not just like, because we even talked about hallucinations. If you said the sky is not blue, it's going to start hallucinating to try to figure out what you're doing to try to give you an answer, because it's designed to try to give you an answer. That's the whole purpose of it.
Yeah. And so we can't say, I don't know. Doesn't have that capability. So, Emily, I want to come back to something else that you said, because we talked about the not piece of it or the no piece of it. I mean, I've always said the most important lessons in life I've learned are what not to do. That means I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, kind of thing. So, one of the things that has helped me understand what to do is identifying those patterns. And we talked about the pattern matching piece of it. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is? So, can you all help me understand a better way, or the AI way of thinking about pattern matching?
So so that is the whole point. The sky is not blue, right?
I
So
would say mahjong. Mahjong is a better way of thinking about pattern matching, because in mahjong, you're looking for matching tiles.
I don't know how to play Mahjong.
yeah, I've watched people, but I haven't played it. But when you do the sky is not blue, right? So there are keywords there: sky, blue, and not. So that not throws it into a tailspin, basically. So if I said the sky is blue, then it's matching, right? It gets a lot of hits about a blue sky, books written about a blue sky. There's a whole bunch of information about blue skies. So it could match those patterns and start giving you information. The moment I say the sky is not blue, it throws it into a completely different direction because it's not blue. So that you're trying to match a pattern that's not a pattern is the problem with that statement. I mean, it can do that, but it gets tricky with Boolean logic, the ands and the nots and stuff like that. The bottom line is that it's just difficult for an algorithm that's designed to look at data, look at patterns to provide an answer, but your prompt that you're feeding it is not, it's a non-existent, a lack of a pattern, basically.
I see. So it's not that they're different concepts, like the negative programming versus the pattern matching piece of it. It's when negative program, when you try to do negative programming, it actually negates pattern matching. And therefore, to bring it back to our analogy, makes the algorithm turn into a 6-year-old that's throwing a temper tantrum.
Yeah, it just doesn't understand
Got it.
if it's, I'm going to match things that are not blue. My gosh, there's, like Emily mentioning LLMs, large language models, they have trillions of records in them. There's a lot of data. So there's a lot of stuff inside of there that's not blue. So now it's trying to figure out what's not blue.
Right.
And a red sea is not blue. Green grass is not blue. What am I supposed to answer
Right.
with the not blue? The sky is not blue because I have so much, it's confusing, right?
And they're also not sky either.
They're not sky either, right? Because typically the sky is blue. That's what's most common.
Right. So when we talk about the application piece of this, and again, we were talking about bringing in the people because we want people to participate in this. We know we need a diverse cross section of people to give their perspectives for a variety of reasons. And we talked about many of them throughout the totality of this season. When it comes to the ethics piece of it and what makes the most sense, how do we actually create a baseline for an ethical approach given the concept of cultural relativism?
So that's the beauty of all of this, right? We already know the limitations. So the ARB is coming into this knowing the limitations. of artificial intelligence in general. One, it's not really intelligent, it's artificially intelligent. We know that it lacks wisdom and knowledge because we human beings have that and we apply the wisdom and knowledge. We also know that it lacks empathy and emotion. And now we know, like what Emily's bringing to the table, the negative constructs of it. So collectively, as an ARB, if we're looking at a project or an approach or a design, and we're looking for the negative or we're trying to make sense of it, we bring that to the table, understanding the limitations with antisocial, non-emotional, tricky logic questions and stuff like that. So we could come into it and say, hey, you're trying to develop an algorithm for this clinical setting, but you're using a negative approach to it. And that could be a problem. Rather than looking for the existence of the pattern, you're looking for non-existence of something that is wide open. And who knows? So maybe that is the appropriate thing to do it. But we better have all eyes, ears, and hands on the output when we're training this thing to make sure that it's going to operate appropriately, especially when we're dealing with a negative test case scenario.
And Steve, I would definitely disagree that we know the limitations. We know some of the limitations. Like,
Yep.
there are new limitations and issues coming up daily. So I definitely would want us to kind of look at it from that lens, that we know what we know right now,
Exactly.
but it's definitely not all encompassing.
I would like to add that, to put this in context for people in pharma and biotech, like the same way that a serious adverse event is a snapshot in time, like we know what, based on the current information, what the limitations are.
Mhm.
They will change over the course of the evolution of this technology as a process, as a tool, and as it's implemented, right?
Yeah, that's a really good example, actually, because you go to the doctor and you're taking medication and you complain to your doctor that you have an extremely bad headache and that gets reported as an adverse event or something. Is that related to it? I don't know. That's why you have triaging and the miracles and stuff that gets work, but you have human beings to figure out, did that medication actually cause the headache or are there other things that have come into play? So it's a perfect example of the adverse event or serious adverse event was data reported by a patient to a physician, but we have human beings in the loop to make sense of that. Now, eliminate the doctor and the nurse and the triaging and reg affairs folks and everybody and think that you're going to create an algorithm to determine if an AE is a SAE or whatever. Well, there's so many things that come into play. How can it figure out if that headache is really related to the medication or not? And there was the article we were just talking about earlier where, there was a diagnosis where a person had chills and a cough, but the algorithm threw in fever. And because of fever, then it would give a diagnosis or prescription basically that you need to take antibiotics. No, that isn't true because the algorithm just threw fever in there. That's what we have to be careful about. So I like the analogy of serious adverse events or adverse events because that shows how human beings need to be in the loop for that. And if we think we're going to apply an algorithm, we have to be very careful about that.
To take that one step further, whenever we're describing and defining criteria for serious adverse events, we always have to give extra attention to life-threatening, because it needs to be immediately life-threatening at the time of the event, not if things progress further. At the time that snapshot is taken, it needs to be immediately life-threatening. So don't write the story moving forward of, if it does this, then this whole other thing is going to happen and goes through a wormhole and then it takes over the planet. Like, don't do that. That's knowing laughter from every single one of you. And I know that.
Yes.
So I think this is we just experienced it, right? This was really not planned, but it was a cool exercise, I think, on how an ARB can operate. So, Michelleanne, you just threw out adverse event, and now collectively, we all have experience in different ways, whether it be algorithms and computer science and the tricky nature and the data and the bias of the data and the reg affairs professionals, collectively our wisdom all working together, thinking through this. This is a perfect example, I think, on how an ARB could work. Like you throw out AE, SAE, and now all of a sudden we're starting to explain, okay, you got to be careful because what about the life-threatening angle on it?
Yes.
So I found another really good example, medical example, in regards to our why can't AI say I don't know? And so a doctor did a study looking at deep learning model and looking at imaging data. Okay, so an AI that can read imaging data should work, shouldn't be too hard. Well, what they found was that they were incapable of saying this 10%, I don't know. So we have a regular computer algorithm that would be able to say, these ones don't fit my algorithm. I don't know. So I'm not going to give you an answer. Well, AI doesn't have that capability. And so it wasn't able to identify that 10% of uncertain cases that should have just been left up to a human.
So to me, the exciting thing is we don't have the answers, just like AI doesn't have the answers if it's a not statement, right? Or whatever. I mean, it probably does in some convoluted way, but we don't. But this conversation that we're having, we're working together. This is exactly what we need to be doing, having the conversation, and we're all learning as we are going along, and we're bringing our skills and expertise to the table to help solve an exciting but challenging problem that we're facing right now. And this conversation we're having right now is kind of what it's all about. It's like, here's the problem. Let's kind of dissect it. Let's throw things apart. Let's agree. Let's disagree, but let's think through and talk aloud with this problem, this AI problem that's set before us.
Okay. So how do we do that? And we have to do it in like the next 5 minutes because we're almost out of time.
So I think in terms of this leads me to the what's next part of the story. So we talked about AI moving at the speed of light and the fact that we as human beings are not actually keeping up with the AI piece of it. So one of the solutions we're suggesting is the ARB, the Algorithm Review Board, because what that then does is bring the humans into the mix in a way. And that's why we've asked our listeners to reach out and help us with this, because we want a diverse cross-section of people. Maybe you're in the industry, maybe you're not. Maybe you have experience with computers and maybe you're someone like me who doesn't. Reach out, and that way we can get that cross-section so that we can minimize. I know we talked about you cannot remove bias completely. We can minimize the bias. So that when we have these algorithms that come to us, we can talk about all of those options, possibilities, scenarios that could potentially happen and what else needs to be addressed by the humans after the algorithm does what it needs to do. Or maybe the algorithm is tweaked somehow. Again, I'm not a technical person. I'm not going to suggest that I know what that would look like. But that's where, again, to be able to have that lens on it so that we are able to have that compassion that you talked about, that empathy, that goodwill towards men type of thing worked into the development of this tool so that we can use it as such, because it is a tool. It's not a decision maker.
Right. And I know, like, from the last podcast that we had talked about terms, definitions, acronyms, and lexicon, and I know that that's already in the works. You already started working on that collectively, y'all. Somebody pulled it together. And so we have that. So we're working on it. So that's good. I would say the other thing is just, again, extending the invite. There's 4 of us right now on the podcast, but there are more people behind the scenes that we're talking to and we're interacting with and interested in as well. So let's expand this, right? And I would say that if there's an individual, a group of people out there that are working on things, right? You're working on a startup company, you're trying to develop something. I mean, we're here for you as a resource, and we bring a wealth of knowledge from many different aspects. And the doors are open to add to this group of us, a small group right now, and let's start tackling the problems. And if we're not getting, if we're not getting bites on some really cool projects that are out there that we could be working on, then we already know some of the things that as an ARB group, we can start looking at, like, how do you handle the negative, the sky is not blue? How do you handle things like that? How do you look at data to determine if there's bias in the data or not? So there's things that we could work on, but it would be really good to open the doors, include more people, and have people bring some problems to us, because a really good way to learn is to work together to solve the problems that we're faced with.
So if we look at IRB again as an example, so that institution review board, they have the criteria that they have at least 5 members of varying backgrounds and make every non-discriminatory effort. And so have 1 member scientific, 1 member non-scientific. So we can use some of these learnings
Mhm.
to apply it to how to create an ARB.
Mhm. What does an ARB team look like?
Those are the questions that we're going to pose to everyone listening is, what does that look like? Where do we go from here?
Mm.
And thank you very much for joining us. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out to us at hello@metisconsultingservices.com. And feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn or the webpage. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Queens of Quality podcast. To continue the conversation, please follow our LinkedIn profile, Metis Consulting Services, or for additional resources, visit our website at metisconsultingservices.com. You can listen to the show free anywhere you find podcasts. Love the show? Don't forget to subscribe, like, review, and share with others. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you next time.